Alright guys, welcome back for video number 3 of chapter 9. As always, start things off, my awful, horrible joke, which you guys gotta start coming up with some of these because these are just awful when I come up with. But I was just wondering if you guys know how a mermaid washes her fins. Tide. So I'm not even going to pretend like that one's funny and tell you guys to take a couple of seconds to laugh at it. You guys got to come up with some ones. Or we're just going to keep getting my horrible jokes and it's just going to be as lame as I am. But anyways, today we're going to start off section 2, which is the home front. And today's just going to be all about how American citizens are asked to help out with the war effort and more specifically in the United States. We know that we have now declared war based on the Zimmerman telegram and the Lusitania and the sinking of the merchant ships and all that kind of stuff has been boiling over, and American sentiment is definitely on the side of the British. War is declared. Now we need to start building up our country and start building up with the idea of militarism like most of the countries in Europe have done. So to start things off, we're going to talk about the War Industry Board. And all throughout the war, the United States government is going to start to set up different groups and different organizations that are going to help monitor what is going on with the war effort. And some are going to be kind of controversial. They're going to start to take away certain civil liberties like freedom of speech in certain extenses here. But it's going to be done for the good of America, which some people kind of fail to see it as. But the first one we're going to talk about is called the War Industries Board. And this was probably the most important out of all of the different groups and organizations that were set up. Because what they are going to do, they're going to coordinate the production of war materials and factories. And they're going to start to sell these different contracts to private companies. And really, they're the people who are in charge of all of the things that have to do with the war, minus the actually sending soldiers overseas to fight it. So as it says on there, they're set up to coordinate the production of the war, and this was something that Woodrow Wilson creates in 1917. He finds a Wall Street broker, Bernard Baruch, to make sure that he is going to be the one running it, and really just trying to make sure that the government is running as efficiently as possible with the industry aspect of the war. So what they're going to do, they're going to control the flow of raw materials. And this is one thing that definitely makes people upset, controlling where the raw materials are going to be going in the United States. And this is kind of going against capitalism, kind of going against our market economy that we had for such a long time. But they're going to control the flow of raw materials to make sure that it's going for the war effort. They're not really trying to let companies profit too much off of the war, but they're going to make sure that they control where those raw materials are going to be going. And that's going to be like oil, coal, rubber, different types of metals. Really, they just control all those raw materials. They're also going to order the construction of a new factory. So, say, for example, they know they need more clothes. Because oftentimes when we think about war, we think about what do we need? We need weapons, we need tanks, we need guns, we need bullets, we need artillery. But we also forget about the other important things, like clothing, like food. So, those types of factories are going to start to come about, but the WIB, which is often the acronym for it, the government just loves to use acronyms to try to simplify things, even though when we ask, what's the WIB, we could just say War Industry Board and probably make things a little bit easier. But anyways, they order the new construction of these factories, and then oftentimes they set prices of goods, which this 100% goes against capitalism. 100% goes against our economy. But it's done to make sure that the government is getting a fair price and they're not just price gouging during the war. So the WIB, or the War Industries Board, they're going to be the first one set up, and probably the most important that was going to be created throughout the war. Now we're going to get to food and fuel. Now the next group that's going to be created is the Food Administration, and this is going to be run by Herbert Hoover, who we'll talk about later in U.S. history. A lot of you guys have probably heard his name before, but his name is synonymous pretty much with being the worst president in U.S. history, which he shouldn't get that term. He did a lot for the country, but unfortunately, he was president when the Great Depression began. So, of course, anytime something negative happens, we don't want to blame ourselves. That's too hard. Blame someone else. That's the easy thing to do. But anyways, probably the most influential and probably the most successful is the Food Administration. Now, they are going to use a lot of propaganda. They're going to use a lot of the media, and here's an example here. With Be Patriotic, sign your country's pledge to save the food. But they are going to try to increase food production while reducing civilian consumption. So what that means, they're going to start to come up with a couple of different days that they want people to be following, such as Wheatless Monday. So no breads, nothing with wheat you're going to be eating on Monday. And the reason they do that way you can send the food overseas to soldiers. They're going to have Meatless Tuesdays. They're going to have Porkless Thursdays. So really, they're just kind of using propaganda in the media to make sure that people are reducing food as much as possible so they can send it overseas. And instead of going out and buying food in a grocery store, they're also going to start to plant what they call victory gardens. Because America and propaganda, we're not just going to say go and plant a garden, it's a victory garden. Because this is going to be the roots of our victory, is everyone going out and planting their own food. And they're going to go beyond that. They're also going to have different pledges like groups of people known as kitchen soldiers. Which, yeah, that was a term that was used, kitchen soldiers, of reducing as much waste and as much food as possible and reducing the fat and stuff like that you're going to be consuming. But that's going to be kind of the food administration under Herbert Hoover. The fuel administration was going to be run by Harry Garfield. And he is going to do a couple of different things to kind of help out with the fuel. First of all, they're going to reduce speed limits. They're going to say that you need to carpool. They're going to say you can only buy so much gasoline. They're going to say that we're now going to pass daylight savings times, which we have today. You know, we look at daylight saving time as, we either get an extra hour of sleep or we lose an extra hour of sleep, which people usually hate. But it's done to save on coal costs. They want to make sure that they're using the daylight as much as possible. So they're going to start with daylight savings time. They are going to reduce factories that are not essential for the government, for the war effort, but basically do anything they can to prevent fuel from being overused. And then lastly, paying for the war. Now, one of the easiest ways to pay for something with the government is to raise taxes. We all hate them. We never want to pay taxes, but they are important. They are influential. Without taxes, there's not going to be police. There's not going to be a military. There's not going to be schooling, which sometimes you're watching these and thinking, we don't want to have schooling because I don't have to watch Mr. Zahn make these horrible videos with these ridiculous jokes. But we need to have taxes. So Congress, they raise income tax, which, we still have today. Hopefully all of you, it's March 4th right now. Hopefully all of you have paid your taxes. If not, you got until April 15th. But Congress is going to raise income taxes. So it's going to now be a little bit more proportional. So the more money you make, the more money you're going to start to pay into it. So they do that, but that's not going to be enough. So now how are they going to make more money? They increase a corporate tax. And what a corporate tax is all these different factories that are profiting off of the war, they are also going to start to be taxed heavily. So the government still, yes, they're making money off of it, but now the government is going to start to get some of that tax money back. And then lastly, because taxes is just not enough. They raise about $20 million, but they just can't sustain a war effort based on that amount. So now they're going to offer bonds. And a bond is basically you're giving a loan to the government, and they're going to pay you back in X amount of years. And you do that because you're going to make interest on it. And just like with the victory gardens, we can't just say, buy a government bond. That's boring. That's lame. So the government changes the name of it. Go and buy a liberty bond. Go and buy a victory bond. You're going to do this to help out the country, help out the war effort, and in the end, help the Allied powers in America win the war.